Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Roofing Contractor and Walls and Ceilings Legal Insights update. I'm Roofing Contractor Editor Art Eisner, and I'm glad to be joined today by RC Editorial Director Rick D'Amato, and of course, Trent Cotney, CEO of Cotney Construction Law. Trent is one of the leading legal experts in the roofing and construction trades, and he represents contractors and associations across the country and now in Canada. So welcome as always, and we appreciate the time you spend with us as well as what you give back to the industry, Trent.
Thank you, Art and Rick. I'm happy to be here.
So let's jump right in. What a wild week it was. This close to an election, it's hard not to talk politics when we're exploring business issues in this country, but it really was an unprecedented week. We went from the first presidential debate of the cycle to really the first presidential health crisis really since Ronald Reagan was shot. I'm curious, Trent, I want to hear, while we'll leave a lot of the debate to the pundits, what did you hear from contractors about this situation and about President Trump's health now that he has coronavirus?
So, Art, it's very interesting, and this election cycle, unlike any other, it's been wrought with chaos. That's the best way to describe it. And we do have a lot of contractors, that are very passionate on both sides of the fence, and they, especially the ones that I'm close with, that contacted me and had some concern over Trump going to the hospital and what that meant for the election, what it meant for future debates, that kind of thing. So I think it is an ongoing concern. What kind of strikes me is the most interesting about both the debate and sort of the rhetoric that you see, during the hospitalization. My understanding is he's out now back at the White House, still not 100% through it yet. But what I want to tell the listeners out there is, recognize a lot of it for what it is. There's a lot of what, it's just propaganda, it's rhetoric. And a lot of times it's hard for us to parse through what is truth anymore. I think we've entered sort of a new realm where, in the past, growing up, I'd rely on what the press had to say. That's where I got my news from. And when somebody said a stat, I would believe the stat. Now, because of sort of the world we live in with social media and everything else, it calls into question almost every aspect of everything that we hear, to where we have to kind of create our own truth as to what it is. So I think that President Trump will use this to his advantage. I think he's already laid the foreshadowing for how he is going to play this in the days to come. I would expect more of the same, especially going into the debate. On the other side of that, it's kind of tough. It's a lot of the policies that he's had in place that have dealt with COVID-19. Him now getting it, they've got to be very careful about how they go about discussing it. I think, there was almost a sense that it wasn't, that the precautions maybe were overblown sometimes or didn't need to be in place. And there's obviously arguments both ways there. But I think from a political perspective, the next few days are going to be critical for how he is perceived moving forward, especially with his base.
And that's kind of, to boil it down for contractors, that's really what I wanted to get at is, now that he has contracted the virus and that messaging, is so important. And of course, as you mentioned, you need to, I guess, trust your source, so to speak. But what does this experience say about the COVID-19 doubters out there, people that don't necessarily take the disease so seriously? And could that put contractors in a precarious legal position if there are crew members or even company owners that just don't believe this is as serious as it is, and that if the president seems to make it through this okay, that all these precautions are really not that necessary?
So, Art, that is a fantastic question, and I want the listeners to really pay attention to this. Okay, if you take anything away from this video, listen to the next few seconds. Okay. It doesn't matter whether you think COVID-19 is the end of the world or you think it's a hoax. The bottom line is that from a liability perspective, from a CDC and OSHA guideline perspective, from an employment perspective, you must continue to take precautions. Now, if you personally want to go out to bars without mask on and do whatever you want, God bless you. That's your right. You're welcome to do all that. from an employer standpoint, from a contractor standpoint, you can never let your guard down because the liability remains the same. Okay, yes, there are legal liability shields being, promoted. There are different things that may come into place, but there's a lot of other factors out there. We talked about OSHA, workers' compensation, the ability to possibly hurt some of your customers through contracts that you have with them if you get some of their employees sick or, third parties sick. So my message to anyone listening to this is regardless of what you think about it, okay, you still got to follow all the precautions. You got to, up until everybody, all government agencies says it's all clear, across the board, that's when you can stop. Right now is not the time to stop. You've got to keep doing it to protect your company.
Well, Trent, whether they support the president or not, how are you advising contractors to keep it level-headed, stay focused on finishing the roofing season strong?
Mm-hmm. So my advice to contractors that I talk to, and, I've got some really good relationships. Most of my friends are in the business, and we have frank conversations, and sometimes they get heated depending on, what we're talking about. But, what I've always told them is recognize politics for what it is. Okay. It is, you need to pick your choices. You need to vote. You need to do whatever you think is right. But ultimately, there's a lot of distraction out there. Okay. From a business owner standpoint, and I'm talking my own standpoint as well, you always have to keep your eye on the ball, right? You always have to keep moving forward. You can never be distracted from what your true purpose is as a business owner. And that is to succeed, to grow, to deal with the problems as they arise and move forward. And what I've told every contractor, there's a lot of worry and concern that if one party gets in, then it's going to be the worst, okay? What I've always told them, I said, look, it doesn't matter who gets into office, okay? The industry is strong, okay? The industry is resilient, and there may be a slightly new game. You just need to learn how to play it, and that's it. It's not, roofing's not going anywhere. Construction's not going anywhere. It's still going to be around. You just have to figure out how to improvise, adapt, and overcome.
Thanks. Well, while we're on the COVID topic, we've talked about OSHA inspections and recent stepped up enforcement, particularly on COVID-19 safety. Contractors had a minor victory last week in terms of how the agency makes those citations available to the public. Could you tell the listeners a little bit more about that?
Sure. So last week, OSHA changed how you can get a citation. Now, one of the biggest problems that I have with OSHA, and don't get me started, is that they often do these press releases based on citations that have been issued, okay? These citations have not been adjudicated, okay? This is not, they've not had an opportunity to argue them. We have personally been involved with several of these types of press releases and had the citations greatly reduced or thrown out altogether. So one of the issues that I took with it was the fact that you can request a copy of the citation. The press can get a hold of the citation as soon as it comes out, and not through the normal channels of how you would normally get a government document, okay? Now, a Freedom of Information Act request is basically a public records request. I can tell you that, like most things, the federal government does not move swiftly. So many times we have to send out FOIA requests for copies of Miller Act payment bonds or, whatever it might be. We might be involved in an OSHA case and we might need to get something after the fact. But recognize that it is a slow moving process. So from a contractor standpoint and from a reputation management standpoint, that's good. But at the end of the day, if you still got a press release coming out saying that all this bad stuff has happened, it's already out there. So it's good. It's a move in the right direction. One of the things that I want to clue listeners into is that there's a stakeholder meeting for whistleblowers for COVID-19 in front of the Department of Labor. I believe it's next week. We are a part of that. I wanted to make sure that the industry's voice is heard. I know there's going to be some other people from the industry there as well. And that's what I encourage all the listeners out there. If, you get involved, your voice counts, regardless of whether it's on a local, state, or federal level. If you've got something that's affecting your business, don't sit on the sideline and wait for it to happen. Have your say.
Well, I don't think contractors, thank you for that. And I don't think contractors have ever wanted to be deceptive or against transparency, but what's the danger or damage on how to access these citations the way it was set up before?
So in the citations, normally what they do is they cite the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulation, that has been violated or alleged to be violated. But in that, oftentimes there are facts, okay, that are added to that to support what the citation is. So the issue there, especially if you're in a situation with a fatality or a serious injury, is that you are getting this extra information out there for public consumption. And it's very difficult from an employer standpoint to not only manage the reputation, but to deal with all these outside forces, you know, press, bad guy lawyers that are possibly trying to get around workers' compensation, all these different types of things that you've got to deal with. So the good news is that it slows the process down. This is always what has supposed to have occurred. You should be going through a public records request process. You shouldn't just be able to say, email somebody and say, hey, give me a copy of the citation. So the fact that they're doing this now is a good thing. You know, one of the things that I would love to see, that we've been advocating for and that we'll continue to advocate for, is a contractor's bill of rights. Basically, if you get pulled over for a criminal violation, right, they're going to give you the Miranda warning. They're going to say you got a right to an attorney, so on and so forth, okay? They don't have to do that from an OSHA standpoint. They don't have to tell you what your rights, your obligations, your duties are. And it would be great to know that, because there are criminal penalties associated with some OSHA violations. So I think if an OSHA inspector had the duty to say, look, if you're a supervisor, you have the right to counsel. Okay, you don't have to talk to me if you don't want to. If they said these kind of things in advance, I think it would create a much more even playing field, and would add some due process that I think is missing now. So we'll continue to advocate for that. I do think, to get back to the question, I do think that this is a step in the right direction.
That's very interesting. And I think, and I'll even mention to Art, I think we need to hear more about the Contractors' Bill of Rights and where that's developing. So COVID-19 is not the only thing going on in our world. We are putting roofs on and making new products and doing all these other things. What are contractors calling you about this past week?
So Rick, you know, this is a sign of the times, and I think it's a combination. It's a perfect storm that COVID-19 has brewed as a result of firings that have occurred, layoffs that have occurred, you know, all these different acts that have come out for paid leave and everything else. Employment claims have shot through the roof. Absolutely. You know, current employees, former employees, you name it. It is, I would say on average, we get 12 to 15 calls a day from contractors that have employee concerns. And one of the things I really want to hit home is just the basics. Okay, obviously employment law is something that we deal with. You know, we've got lawyers that specialize in it. I have to deal with it on a daily basis, but some basics that every listener needs to take home. And that is, you got to have an up-to-date manual. Okay, you got to have an up-to-date manual, because that manual is going to be what you trace your policies back to. Okay, if you have, for example, with COVID-19, there are things like remote work. Okay, you've got to have policies that deal with how you access your technology, privacy rights, your ability to monitor what's going on. A lot of those different types of things I think are absolutely critical. Here's where I see contractors screw up, Rick. They have these policies in place, but they don't get the sign-off sheets from the employees. So it's very hard to enforce some of this stuff unless you have magic language in your manual. And then just one final thing that I kind of want to mention is COVID-19 is constantly changing. So your HR professionals have to be on top of this. Okay, they have to be on top of this. And now more than ever, you want to think strategically about how you deal with employees and former employees. Okay, the unemployment benefits are starting to run out, and you've got former employees that are at home that have nothing better to do than watch TV, play on the internet, do whatever, and they see bad guy lawyers come on saying, hey, let's sue your employer. Okay, you want to make sure that you got your ducks in a row and that you are doing everything you can to eliminate those types of issues before they happen.
Thanks, Trent. That's all good information. And Art, I think you have some questions on PPP.
Well, yeah, definitely some sound legal advice there, Trent, and I'm sure that's probably something you'll get into. I do want to mention two quick things with your work with the NRCA. We touched on the tax implications of the Paycheck Protection Program before, but the NRCA just issued an action alert for contractors to really begin advocating for what's called the Small Business Expense Protection Act. So to follow up on what you were talking about earlier about stepping up and getting active, what is that Protection Act all about? What do contractors need to do?
So I believe we were talking about this issue maybe a few episodes ago, and the issue is that if the PPP funds are forgiven, that you can't take them as a normal expense deduction, which means that in effect, depending on how you're structured, you may end up having to pay tax on the forgiven funds, right? So the idea behind this Small Business Expense Protection Act is that what they're going to do is say that you can use it as a deduction for tax purposes. Now, I know that there's a lot of support for this, so I don't know exactly where it's going. What's interesting, Art, is I've been talking to a lot of our friends up in DC, and they are actively working on that stimulus plan. You know, I think now, honestly, the COVID-19 diagnosis from Trump probably accelerated what we're going to see as far as a stimulus plan. I would not be surprised to see something sooner rather than later, as opposed to a week ago where it looked like it wasn't going to happen before election. So you never know with DC. It's always a moving target. But I think things like this, the small business, expense protection program that they're talking about, you're going to start seeing more and more of this as the year unfolds. You know, I definitely think you're going to see something before the end of the year.
Well, it's certainly interesting what gets the wheels moving in Washington, isn't it?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, no doubt there. Trent, where can contractors find out more?
So obviously they can contact me anytime they want at tcottney@cottneycl.com or visit our website, cottneycl.com. We're always happy to talk to people in the industry.
Okay, well, thank you again, Trent, Rick, and for everyone else out there joining us. Check out more coverage at wconline.com and roofingcontractor.com. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for our new digital edition by hitting the subscribe button up above and just a little to the right. Stay safe, everyone. We'll see you next time.